You're not enough." The words cut through the restaurant like a blade through silk. Every head turned. Every fork paused midair. At table 7, a woman in a wheelchair sat frozen, her face draining of color as her date stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out without looking back. The silence that followed was suffocating. But at table 12, a man with sharp eyes and an expensive watch made a decision that would shatter everything he thought he knew about himself. This isn't a fairy tale. It's messier than that. It's about a billionaire who couldn't look away, a woman who'd forgotten how to hope, and the single choice that proved sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. Before we dive in, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The rain had stopped an hour ago, leaving Seattle's streets slick and reflective under the glow of streetlights. Adrian Vale sat in the corner booth of Marcello's, a mid-tier Italian restaurant he'd chosen specifically because it wasn't the kind of place people would recognize him. The leather jacket he wore over a plain gray shirt was deliberate. The watch, understated, expensive only to those who knew, was hidden under his sleeve. His son, 8-year-old Cameron, sat across from him, swinging his legs and stabbing at his pasta with the concentration of a surgeon. "Dad, why do they put so many vegetables in this?" Cameron wrinkled his nose at a piece of zucchini. "Because they're trying to keep you alive past 20, Adrian said without looking up from his phone. He was scrolling through emails he had no intention of answering. "That's a long time from now." "Not as long as you think." Cameron considered this, then shrugged and ate the zucchini. Adrian allowed himself a small smile. The kid was resilient in ways Adrian hadn't been at that age. Maybe that was Cameron's mother's influence, back when she'd still been around. Before the divorce, before the custody battle that had drained both of them and left Cameron in Adrian's care 4 days a week. Adrian pocketed his phone and looked at his son. Really looked. Cameron had his mother's dark curls and Adrian's steel gray eyes. The combination was unsettling sometimes, like seeing two timelines collide in one small face. "You good?" Adrian asked. Cameron nodded. "Can I get dessert?" "Depends. You gonna finish that?" "Probably." "Then probably you can get dessert." Cameron grinned and went back to his pasta. Adrian picked up his wine glass, swirled it once, and let his gaze drift around the restaurant. It was a Thursday night, not too crowded. A few couples, a group of college kids celebrating something, an older man reading a book while he ate alone. Normal. Unremarkable. That's when the door opened. She came in quietly, almost apologetically, as if she were afraid of taking up space. Adrian noticed her immediately, though he couldn't say why. She wasn't dressed to impress, a simple gray cardigan over a white blouse. Jeans that looked like they'd been washed too many times. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She was pretty in an understated way, the kind of pretty that didn't demand attention, but deserved it. And she was in a wheelchair. Adrian watched as she maneuvered through the entrance, her hands steady on the wheels. She moved with practiced efficiency, but there was something tentative in the way she glanced around the room, like she was bracing for impact. The hostess approached her with a smile that looked a little too bright. "Hi, do you have a reservation?" Yes. "Under Brooks?" "I'm meeting someone." The hostess checked her list. "Oh yes, he's already here. Right this way." Adrian turned his attention back to Cameron, but he was aware of her in his peripheral vision as the hostess led her to a table near the window. A man was already sitting there, mid-30s, suit and tie, the kind of guy who looked like he spent his lunch breaks at the gym and his evenings networking. He stood when she approached, and for a moment Adrian thought maybe this was going to be fine. Maybe this was just two people having dinner. Then the man saw the wheelchair. Adrian watched the shift happen in real time. The man's smile faltered. His eyes dropped, then lifted, then dropped again like he couldn't figure out where to look. The woman, Brooks, the hostess, had said, stopped a few feet from the table, her hands still on the wheels. "Hi," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "Sorry I'm late. Parking was—" "You didn't mention—" The man cut her off, his voice tight. He gestured vaguely at the wheelchair, not quite looking at it. Brooks's smile froze. "Mention what?" "That you—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't think this is going to work. The restaurant wasn't loud, but it felt like every conversation had dropped by half a decibel. Adrian saw Brooke's hands tighten on the armrests of her wheelchair. "I don't understand," she said, and Adrian heard the tremor in her voice that she was trying to hide. "We've been talking for weeks. You said—" "I know what I said." The man grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. "But I didn't sign up for this." "For what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his wallet, threw two 20s on the table, and looked at her with something that might have been pity or disgust or both. "You're not enough," he said. Flat, final. "I'm sorry, but you're just not enough." And then he walked out. The silence that followed was the kind that made Adrian's chest tighten. Brooke sat there, unmoving, staring at the empty chair across from her. The hostess hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to approach. A waiter pretended to wipe down a table that was already clean. The college kids had stopped laughing. Adrian felt Cameron tug on his sleeve. "Dad," Cameron whispered, "that guy was mean." "Yeah," Adrian said quietly. "He was." "Is she okay?" Adrian looked at Brooks. She was still staring at the empty chair, her face carefully blank in the way people's faces get when they're trying very hard not to cry in public. Her hands were shaking. "No," Adrian said. "I don't think she is." Cameron frowned. "Should we do something?" Adrian hesitated. This wasn't his business. He'd learned a long time ago that getting involved in other people's problems usually made things worse. He had enough of his own to manage, a company on the verge of a major acquisition, an ex-wife who called at midnight to complain about custody arrangements, a son who asked questions Adrian didn't always know how to answer. But Cameron was looking at him with those wide, expectant eyes, waiting for his father to do the right thing. And Brooks was still sitting there, frozen, as the restaurant slowly returned to its normal hum around her like she was a stone in a river. Adrian set down his wine glass. "Yeah," he said, "we should." He stood up, and Cameron immediately scrambled out of his seat to follow. Adrian crossed the restaurant with his son at his heels, weaving between tables until he reached Brooks. She didn't notice him at first. She was staring down at her hands now, her breathing shallow and controlled. "Excuse me," Adrian said. She looked up, startled. Up close, Adrian could see that her eyes were brown and very tired, and that she was maybe a second away from falling apart completely. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "I was just leaving." "Don't," Adrian said. "Don't apologize, and don't leave." She blinked at him, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but I saw what just happened, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend it's okay." He gestured to the empty seat. "You came here for dinner. You should have dinner." She shook her head. "I don't—" "With us," Cameron piped up. He stepped forward, smiling the way only kids can smile, without guile or agenda. "We have extra room, and Dad ordered too much bread." Brooks looked between Adrian and Cameron, her expression somewhere between disbelief and suspicion. "That's very kind, but I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," Adrian said. "We're inviting you. Big difference." She hesitated, and Adrian could see her weighing it. The humiliation of staying versus the humiliation of leaving. The fear of accepting help versus the exhaustion of always refusing it. "Please," Cameron said. "I hate eating vegetables alone." That got a flicker of a smile from her. Small, but real. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, thank you." Adrian nodded to the hostess, who quickly cleared Brooks' table and helped arrange things so she could join them. Within minutes, she was seated at their booth, her wheelchair tucked neatly at the end. Cameron had already launched into an explanation of why zucchini was a conspiracy, and Brooks was listening with the kind of attention that suggested she was grateful for the distraction. Adrian watched them for a moment, then caught the waiter's eye and ordered another glass of wine. For her, not him. She looked like she needed it. "I'm Lena, by the way," she said, glancing at Adrian. "Lena Brooks." "Adrian? This is Cameron." "Hi, Cameron." "Hi. Are you going to order the pasta? It's pretty good, except for the vegetables." Lena laughed, a soft, surprised sound. "I'll keep that in mind." The waiter appeared with the wine, and Lena accepted it with a quiet thank you. She took a sip, then another, and Adrian saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said after a moment, not looking at him. Don't be. I'm sorry that guy was an asshole. Cameron's head snapped up. Dad, you said a bad word. I did. Sometimes bad words are necessary. Lena smiled despite herself. He's right, though. I should have mentioned it. In my profile, that I use a wheelchair. Why? Adrian asked. She looked at him, surprised. Because most people want to know. Most people are idiots. Dad, Cameron, eat your pasta. Lena set down her wine glass, her fingers tracing the rim. It's easier this way. If I tell them up front, they can decide whether or not to waste their time. Saves everyone the trouble. That's the most depressing thing I've heard all week, Adrian said. Well, it's been a depressing kind of week. Cameron looked up from his plate. What happened? Cameron, Adrian warned. It's okay, Lena said. She looked at Cameron, and Adrian saw her decide something. I had a rough day at work, and then I thought tonight would be better, but she gestured vaguely at the empty space where her date had been. It wasn't. What do you do? Cameron asked. I'm a teacher, 3rd grade. That's my grade. Really? What's your teacher's name? Ms. Patterson. She's okay. She gives too much homework, though. I probably give too much homework, too. Why do teachers do that? Lena smiled. Because we're secretly evil. Cameron giggled, and Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been until that moment, watching his son laugh with a stranger who an hour ago had been on the verge of tears. The waiter returned to take Lena's order. She asked for the chicken marsala, no vegetables, which made Cameron declare her officially cool. They fell into an easy rhythm after that, Cameron asking questions, Lena answering them with patience and humor, Adrian observing quietly from the sidelines. He learned that Lena had been teaching for 6 years, that she'd moved to Seattle from Portland 3 years ago, that she liked terrible reality TV and good coffee and had a cat named Hemingway who was an absolute tyrant. She didn't mention the wheelchair again, and neither did Cameron. It was just there, part of her, the way Adrian's watch was part of him. What about you? Lena asked, turning to Adrian. What do you do? I work in tech, Adrian said, which was technically true. Vail Industries had started as a tech company before expanding into about a dozen other sectors. That's vague. It's a vague job. She smiled. Fair enough. Cameron, who had been unusually quiet for the past minute, suddenly looked up. Dad's a billionaire, he announced. Adrian closed his eyes. Cameron. What? You are. Lena's eyebrows shot up. Are you? Adrian sighed. It's complicated. It's really not, Cameron said cheerfully. He has a lot of money, like a lot. Lena looked at Adrian, her expression unreadable. Why didn't you say anything? Because it's not relevant. Not relevant? No. Adrian met her gaze steadily. You needed dinner and decent company. My bank account has nothing to do with either of those things. She studied him for a long moment, and Adrian had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen in a way he usually avoided. Most people looked at him and saw dollar signs, or opportunities, or threats. Lena just looked at him like he was a puzzle she was trying to figure out. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Okay. You're right. It's not relevant. She picked up her fork. But for the record, this is really weird. What is? This whole night, I came here expecting... She stopped, shook her head. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. Is this bad? Cameron asked, worried. No, Lena said quickly. No, it's not bad. It's just unexpected. They finished dinner with the easy conversation of people who had somehow skipped past the awkward small talk and landed in something more comfortable. Lena told a story about a student who had tried to convince her that his dog had eaten his homework, except he didn't have a dog, and the homework in question was a math test they'd taken in class. Cameron countered with a story about a kid in his class who had brought a live frog to school and set it loose during silent reading time. Adrian mostly listened, occasionally interjecting, but content to let them talk. He watched Lena's face as she laughed at Cameron's story, the way her whole expression changed when she smiled, like someone had turned on a light inside her. He thought about the man who had walked out earlier, who had looked at her and seen only what was missing instead of what was there. Idiot, Adrian thought again. When the check came, Adrian paid before Lena could even reach for her purse. She protested, but he waved her off. "You can get it next time," he said, and then immediately wondered why he'd said that. Next time. Like this was going to happen again. But Lena didn't look uncomfortable. She just smiled and said, "Deal." They walked out together, or rather, Adrian and Cameron walked while Lena wheeled herself beside them. The Seattle air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of rain and asphalt. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just a few scattered cars under the yellow glow of streetlights. "Where are you parked?" Adrian asked. "Just over there." Lena pointed to a beat-up Honda near the edge of the lot. "We'll walk you." "You don't have to—" "I know." They crossed the parking lot in comfortable silence. When they reached Lena's car, she unlocked it and transferred from her wheelchair to the driver's seat with practiced efficiency. Adrian noticed the hand controls on the steering column, the way she folded the wheelchair and hefted it into the back seat like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "Thank you," Lena said, looking up at Adrian. "For tonight. You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." "Why?" Adrian thought about it. "Because Cameron was watching, and I want him to grow up knowing that when someone needs help, you help them. No conditions, no questions." Lena's eyes softened. "You're a good dad." "I'm a work in progress." "Aren't we all?" Cameron tugged on Adrian's hand. "Dad, can we see Lena again?" Adrian looked at Lena, saw the flicker of hope and fear cross her face in equal measure. "I don't know, buddy. That's up to her." Lena bit her lip. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "If you're serious." "I'm serious." She smiled. A real smile this time, not the careful, guarded ones from earlier. "Then, yeah, I'd really like that." They exchanged numbers, Adrian typing hers into his phone while Cameron bounced impatiently beside him. When they were done, Lena started her car and rolled down the window. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Cameron." "Good night," Cameron waved enthusiastically. Adrian raised a hand. "Drive safe." She pulled out of the parking lot, her taillights disappearing into the Seattle night. Adrian and Cameron stood there for a moment, watching her go. "I like her," Cameron said. "Yeah," Adrian said. "Me too." They walked to Adrian's car, a black Tesla that Cameron insisted on calling the spaceship, and climbed in. Cameron buckled himself in the back seat while Adrian started the engine. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "That guy who left her, he was wrong, right?" Adrian looked at his son in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, buddy, he was really wrong." "Good. I thought so." They drove home through streets that were quiet and nearly empty, the city settling into its late-night rhythm. Adrian's mind was already racing ahead, to the acquisition deal he had to close next week, to the meeting with his lawyers about custody arrangements, to the 1,000 small fires he'd have to put out tomorrow. But underneath all of that, there was something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. He thought about Lena Brooks, the way she'd held herself together when most people would have fallen apart. The way she'd laughed with Cameron like the worst night of her week hadn't just happened. The way she'd looked at Adrian without seeing his money or his reputation, just him. He wondered what her story was. What had put her in that wheelchair? What had brought her to Seattle? What made her wake up every morning and face a world that clearly wasn't built for her and probably never would be? He wondered if she'd actually want to see him again, or if she'd wake up tomorrow and realize that accepting his invitation had been a moment of weakness she'd regret. He wondered if he was making a mistake. "Probably," a voice in his head said. It sounded a lot like his ex-wife. But Cameron was humming in the back seat, happy in a way Adrian hadn't seen in weeks. And Adrian's phone was heavy in his pocket, Lena's number saved under a contact he'd labeled simply Lena B. Adrian pulled into his driveway, a modern house in Queen Anne that was too big for two people but had seemed necessary at the time, and killed the engine. Cameron unbuckled himself and tumbled out of the car, already talking about whether they should have pancakes or waffles for breakfast. Adrian followed him inside, his mind still half in that parking lot, watching taillights disappear into the dark. The house was quiet. The housekeeper had left hours ago. Adrian sent Cameron to brush his teeth and get ready for bed, then poured himself a drink, scotch, neat, and stood in the kitchen staring at his phone. He should wait, give it a day or two, play it cool. But he thought about the way Lena had looked when that man walked out, the way her hands had shaken, the way she'd said, "You're not enough," like she'd heard it before and was tired of being surprised by it. Adrian opened his messages and typed, "Thanks for joining us tonight. Cameron hasn't stopped talking about you." He hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said. I'd like to see you again." He hit send before he could overthink it. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "I'd like that too." "When?" Adrian smiled. "How's Saturday?" "Saturday's good." "Where?" "Leave that to me." Mysterious. I like it. Adrian set his phone down, the smile still on his face. He could hear Cameron upstairs, probably reading instead of sleeping like he was supposed to be. The house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. He finished his scotch and headed upstairs, already thinking about Saturday, already wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian Vale, who had built an empire from nothing, who had survived a divorce that would have broken most people, who had learned to navigate a world that demanded perfection and gave nothing back, felt something close to hope. It scared him more than he wanted to admit. But he didn't put the phone down. And he didn't delete Lena's number. He just stood there in his too big house, listening to his son hum in the next room, thinking about a woman in a wheelchair who had somehow managed to make him feel something other than tired. Tomorrow, he'd go back to being Adrian Vale, billionaire, CEO, single father, always 3 steps ahead and never quite satisfied. But tonight, he was just a man who'd done something kind and found himself wanting to do it again. That would have to be enough. For now. Saturday came faster than Adrian expected. He'd spent the better part of Friday evening second-guessing himself, staring at restaurant reviews on his laptop while Cameron did homework at the kitchen table. Nothing felt right. Too fancy would look like he was showing off. Too casual would seem like he didn't care. He'd finally settled on a small French bistro in Fremont that had good reviews and didn't require a tuxedo. "You're nervous," Cameron observed, not looking up from his math worksheet. "I'm not nervous." "You've changed your shirt 3 times." Adrian looked down at the blue button-down he was wearing. "How do you even know that?" "I have eyes, Dad. Also, you only check your phone that much when you're nervous." Adrian set his phone face down on the counter. "I'm just making sure everything's set." "For your date." "It's not a date." Cameron looked up, grinning. "It's totally a date." Adrian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. "Finish your homework." "I'm just saying you like her." "I barely know her." "You smiled at your phone yesterday. You never smile at your phone." Adrian picked up his coffee mug just to have something to do with his hands. "That's not true." "Name one time." Adrian couldn't. He took a sip of coffee instead. Cameron went back to his math, still smiling. "It's okay, Dad. I like her too. She's cool." "Yeah," Adrian said quietly. "She is." Now it was Saturday afternoon, and Adrian was standing in front of his closet, trying to decide if jeans were too casual or if slacks would make him look like he was trying too hard. His phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Lena. "Still on for tonight? No pressure if you changed your mind." Adrian typed back immediately. "Definitely still on." "Picking you up at 7? I can meet you there." "I know, but I'd like to pick you up." There was a pause longer than the previous ones. Adrian could almost see her sitting somewhere, phone in hand, deciding whether to let him do this. "Okay. 1247E Republican Street, Apartment 3. B. See you at 7. Adrian set the phone down and went with the jeans, dark, no holes, paired with a gray sweater that Cameron had once said made him look like a person instead of a boss. He wasn't entirely sure that was a compliment, but he'd take it. At 6:30, he said goodbye to Cameron, who was staying with Mrs. Chen from next door. She was a retired school teacher who had somehow decided that Adrian and Cameron needed looking after, and who made the kind of dumplings that Cameron would probably sell state secrets for. "Have fun on your date," Cameron called as Adrian headed for the door. "It's not—" Adrian stopped. "Thanks, buddy." Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly. "You look nice, Mr. Vale." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." "This is the teacher, the one from Thursday?" News traveled fast, apparently. "Yes." "Good. You need someone sensible. Your ex-wife was too much drama." Adrian didn't disagree, so he just nodded and left before Mrs. Chen could offer any more relationship advice. The drive to Capitol Hill took 15 minutes in Saturday traffic. Lena's building was an older brick structure with a ramp leading to the entrance and an elevator that looked like it had seen better days. Adrian pressed the buzzer for 3B and waited. "Hello?" Lena's voice came through the intercom, slightly distorted. "It's Adrian. Come on up. Door's unlocked." The elevator groaned its way to the third floor. Adrian found apartment 3B at the end of the hall and knocked twice before pushing the door open. "In here!" Lena called from somewhere inside. Adrian stepped into a small living room that was crammed with bookshelves, a couch that had definitely been bought secondhand, and approximately 1,000 plants on every available surface. A large orange cat was sprawled across the back of the couch, watching him with the disdain that only cats can manage. "That's Hemingway," Lena said, wheeling herself out from what Adrian assumed was the bedroom. "He's judging you. He judges everyone." Adrian looked at the cat. The cat looked back, unimpressed. "Fair enough," Adrian said, then turned to Lena and forgot about the cat entirely. She was wearing a dark green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She'd done something with makeup that made her look both natural and somehow more present, more vivid. "You look beautiful," Adrian said, and immediately felt like an idiot for how that came out. Too fast, too sincere. But Lena smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." "I try." She grabbed a black cardigan from the arm of her wheelchair and pulled it on. "So where are we going?" "It's a surprise." "I don't like surprises." "You'll like this one." Confident. Hopeful. Lena studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, let's go." Getting to the car was easier than Adrian expected. The building had a ramp, and Lena transferred to the passenger seat while Adrian folded her wheelchair and put it in the trunk. She'd brought a pillow that she positioned behind her back without comment, adjusting herself with the kind of efficiency that spoke to years of practice. "You okay?" Adrian asked as he slid into the driver's seat. "Yeah, just getting comfortable. Long sitting can be—" She stopped, shook her head. "Sorry. You don't need the medical rundown." "I don't mind." "Most people mind." "I'm not most people." Lena glanced at him. "No. I'm starting to figure that out." Adrian pulled out into traffic, heading toward Fremont. The bistro wasn't far, but he took the long way, looping along the water where the evening light turned everything soft and golden. "So," Lena said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "are you going to tell me anything about yourself, or are we going to keep playing mysterious billionaire?" Adrian smiled. "What do you want to know?" "I don't know, normal stuff. Where are you from? How did you end up in Seattle? Why tech?" "Ohio. I came out here for college and never left. And tech because I was good at it and it paid well." "That's the shortest biography I've ever heard. I'm efficient. You're evasive." Adrian couldn't argue with that. "Okay, fine. I grew up outside Cleveland in a town that had more cows than people. My dad worked at a factory. My mom was a nurse. I got a scholarship to UW, studied computer science, started a company in my garage with 2 friends, and somehow didn't fail." "Somehow?" "We almost failed a lot, especially at the beginning. There was a 6-month period where I was sleeping on a futon in the office and eating ramen for every meal. The classic startup story. It's a cliche because it's true." Adrian signaled and turned onto a side street. "We got lucky. Right place, right time, right product. 5 years later, we sold to a bigger company for enough money that I could start Vail Industries. And now you're a billionaire who eats at mid-tier Italian restaurants. I like mid-tier Italian restaurants. They don't care who you are." Lena was quiet for a moment. "Is that hard? People caring who you are all the time?" "Sometimes. Yeah." "Is that why you didn't tell me? On Thursday?" Adrian thought about it. "Partly, but also because it didn't matter. You needed someone to not be an asshole. My bank account had nothing to do with that. But it has something to do with this?" "Does it?" Lena looked out the window at the water, the light catching in her hair. "I don't know yet. Ask me after dinner." They pulled up to the bistro a few minutes later. It was small, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, with string lights in the windows and mismatched chairs on the sidewalk. Adrian had called ahead to make sure they could accommodate a wheelchair, and the owner had assured him it wouldn't be a problem. It was a problem, not a big one, but enough. The door was narrow, and while Lena could technically fit through, it required some maneuvering. The host looked flustered, apologizing too much, which just made it more awkward. By the time they were seated at a table near the back, Lena's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry," Adrian said once the host had left. "I should have checked. It's fine." "It's not. I should have—" "Adrian," Lena looked at him steadily. "It's fine. This is actually better than most places. At least they have a ramp in the back. That's a pretty low bar. Welcome to my life." Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and opened his menu. The bistro specialized in small plates, the kind of food that was meant to be shared. They ordered too much, Adrian's doing, and spent the next hour working their way through duck confit and roasted vegetables and bread that was still warm from the oven. "Okay," Lena said, stealing the last piece of bread before Adrian could grab it. "My turn. What's the story with Cameron's mom?" Adrian had been expecting this question, but it still made his chest tighten. "Her name is Vanessa. We were married for 5 years. Divorced 3 years ago. What happened? The short version? We wanted different things. She wanted someone who would be home for dinner every night. I wanted to build an empire. Neither of us were willing to compromise. And Cameron? We share custody, 4 days with me, 3 with her. It's—" Adrian stopped, searching for the right word. "It's fine. Not great, but fine." "Does he like it?" "No, but he's a good kid. He doesn't complain." Lena set down her wine glass. "That's not the same as being okay." "I know." They were quiet for a moment. Then Lena said, "For what it's worth, he seems happy. When we had dinner on Thursday, he was happy. He liked you. I liked him too. He's sweet and funny, and he has good taste in dinner companions." Adrian smiled despite himself. "He gets that from me. Confident and hopeful. Interesting combination. I contain multitudes." Lena laughed, the same soft, surprised laugh from Thursday. "Quoting Whitman now?" "Careful. I might think you're cultured." "I read sometimes." "Let me guess. Business books? The Art of War? How to Win Friends and Influence People?" "Actually, I mostly read sci-fi. Bad sci-fi. The kind with explosions on the cover and plot holes you could drive a truck through." Lena's eyebrows shot up. "Really?" "Really. Vanessa hated it, said it was lowbrow." "Vanessa sounds exhausting." "She was. Is. I don't know. We're different people now." Lena nodded slowly, like she understood more than Adrian had said out loud. "What about you?" he asked, deflecting. "What's your story?" "Oregon, right? Portland? Born and raised. Moved here 3 years ago for the job." "Just for the job?" Lena hesitated, and Adrian saw the walls go up. Not completely, but enough. "Mostly, I needed a change. Seattle seemed like a good place to start over." "Start over from what?" "Life. All of it." She picked up her wine glass, took a sip. "I used to be a dancer. Ballet, mostly. Professionally. That was my whole world from the time I was 6 until I was 27. Adrian did the math. She was 30 now. "What happened when you were 27? Lena set her glass down carefully, and Adrian knew he'd hit something. "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. I was coming home from rehearsal." Her voice was flat, rehearsed, like she'd told this story too many times. "I broke my back. To 10 incomplete spinal cord injury. Lost function below my waist." "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. It doesn't change anything." "No, but I'm still sorry." Lena looked at him, and some of the hardness in her expression softened. "Thank you. Really. What happened to the driver?" 6 months in jail, out in 3. He wrote me a letter once, apologizing. I never opened it." She shrugged. "What's the point? He didn't mean to ruin my life. He was just drunk and stupid. Doesn't make me less paralyzed." Adrian wanted to say something, anything, that would make this better. But there was nothing to say. No amount of money or influence or good intentions could change what had happened to her. "So you became a teacher," he said instead. "Yeah, I figured if I couldn't dance, I could at least do something that mattered. Turns out I'm good with kids. They don't care about the wheelchair. They just want to know if they can do wheelies." "Can you?" "I can do a mean wheelie. Also, I can spin in place. which third graders think is the coolest thing ever. Adrian smiled. I bet Cameron would love that. I'll show him sometime. He'd like that. They finished dinner slowly, the conversation drifting from topic to topic. Books they'd read, terrible movies they'd loved anyway, the absurdity of Seattle weather. Lena told him about the student who'd insisted that Australia wasn't real because how can a whole country be upside down? Adrian told her about the time Cameron had decided to become a vegetarian for exactly 4 days before caving at the sight of bacon. It was easy. Easier than Adrian expected. Easier than anything had been in a long time. When the check came, Adrian paid again, waving off Lena's protests. You can get the next one, he said, and then realized he'd done it again. Assumed there would be a next one. But Lena just smiled. Deal. They walked out into the cool Seattle evening, the sky still holding on to the last threads of daylight. Adrian had parked a block away and they moved slowly down the sidewalk, Lena wheeling beside him while Adrian tried not to walk too fast. Can I ask you something? Lena said after a moment. Sure. Why did you come over? On Thursday. You didn't know me. You could have just stayed at your table. Adrian had been waiting for this question too, because Cameron asked if we should do something, and I didn't want to tell him no. That's it? No, that's not it. Adrian stopped walking, and Lena stopped too. I came over because that guy was wrong, and because I've spent enough time watching people get treated like they don't matter. I didn't want to watch it again. Lena looked up at him, the streetlights casting shadows across her face. You didn't even know me. Didn't need to. Most people would have looked away. I'm not most people. So you keep saying. Lena's voice was soft, almost tentative. Why? Adrian thought about all the answers he could give. About growing up poor and learning early that the world didn't care about you unless you forced it to. About building a company from nothing and watching people dismiss him until the money came through. About divorce and custody battles and the slow grinding realization that success didn't mean anything if you were alone at the end of the day. But what he said was, because I wanted to, that's all. Lena held his gaze for a long moment, and Adrian had the feeling he was being weighed and measured against some internal standard he couldn't see. Okay, she said finally. I believe you. They started walking again, and Adrian felt something settle in his chest. Relief, maybe, or something close to it. When they reached the car, Adrian got Lena's wheelchair from the trunk and helped her transfer, though helped was a strong word for what he actually did, which was mostly stand nearby while she did everything herself. She was back in the driver's seat in under a minute, the wheelchair folded and stowed. You're good at that, Adrian observed. 3 years of practice. You get efficient. Adrian pulled out into traffic, heading back toward Capitol Hill. The streets were busier now, Saturday night in full swing. They passed bars with crowds spilling onto the sidewalk, restaurants with lines out the door, couples walking hand in hand under the streetlights. Can I tell you something weird? Lena said suddenly. Sure. I almost didn't come tonight. I woke up this morning and thought about texting you to cancel. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why didn't you? Because I'm tired of saying no to things just because I'm scared. And because... She stopped, then continued. Because you didn't look at me like I was broken. On Thursday. You just looked at me like I was a person who needed dinner. You are a person who needed dinner. Yeah, but most people don't see it that way. They see the wheelchair and that's it. That's all I am. Adrian glanced at her, then back at the road. That guy on Thursday was an idiot. I stand by that assessment. Lena laughed. Yeah, he really was. They pulled up outside Lena's building, and Adrian killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. I had a good time tonight, Lena said. I know I was weird about it earlier, but I did, really. Good, me too. Even though the door was too narrow and the host was awkward? Even though, Lena smiled, then reached for the door handle. I should... Wait, Adrian said. She stopped, turned back. Yeah? Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. What was he supposed to say? That he wanted to see her again? That he hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in years? That for the first time since his divorce, he'd spent an evening not thinking about work or custody agreements, or all the ways he'd failed? Can I see you again? He said finally. I know that's probably too forward, but yes. Yes? Yes, I'd like that. Lena was smiling now, the kind of smile that made her whole face light up. I was hoping you'd ask. Adrian felt something warm spread through his chest. When? I don't know. When are you free? I can make time. That's not an answer. Tuesday? Dinner again? I teach until 4. I'll pick you up at 6. Lena nodded. Okay, 6. Adrian got out and grabbed her wheelchair from the trunk. This time he waited while she transferred, watching the easy efficiency of her movements. When she was settled, she looked up at him. Thank you, she said, for tonight, for Thursday, for not being like everyone else. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I want to. She wheeled toward the building entrance, then stopped and turned back. Adrian? Yeah? I'm glad you came over, on Thursday. I'm glad you didn't look away. Me too. She smiled one more time, then disappeared into the building. Adrian stood there for a moment, watching the door close behind her, feeling like he'd just stepped off a ledge and found solid ground instead of empty air. He drove home through streets that felt different somehow, like the city had rearranged itself while he wasn't looking. When he got back, Mrs. Chen was knitting on his couch while Cameron slept upstairs. Good date? She asked, not looking up from her knitting. It was good. You're smiling. Must have been very good. Adrian touched his face and realized she was right. Yeah, it was. Mrs. Chen nodded sagely. Good. You need someone who makes you smile. Life's too short for people who don't. When did you get so wise, Mrs. Chen? I've been wise. You're just now paying attention. Adrian laughed and walked her back to her apartment next door, thanking her for watching Cameron. Then he went upstairs and checked on his son, who was sprawled across his bed with a book open on his chest, dead asleep. Adrian moved the book to the nightstand and pulled the blanket up over Cameron's shoulders. The kid stirred but didn't wake. Your dad might be dating someone, Adrian whispered. Don't get too excited. It's early. Could be nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. Adrian went to his own room and changed into sweats, then sat on the edge of his bed with his phone in his hand. He typed out a message to Lena. Made it home. Thanks for tonight. Her reply came almost immediately. Thank you for not canceling when you realized I was serious about the cat being a tyrant. Hemingway and I have an understanding, which is, he tolerates my existence, I tolerate his. Sounds about right. Adrian smiled at his phone like an idiot, then typed, looking forward to Tuesday. Me too. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Lena. He set the phone down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind was already racing ahead to Tuesday, to where they'd go, what they'd talk about, then to the week after that, the month after that. He was getting ahead of himself, he knew that. 1 date, 2, technically, didn't mean anything. People had good first dates all the time, and then it fizzled out. That's how these things worked. But lying there in the dark, Adrian let himself hope. Just a little. The next few days passed in a blur. Work demanded his attention. There was always work, but Adrian found his mind drifting at odd moments. In the middle of a board meeting, during a conference call with investors, while reviewing quarterly reports that should have had his full focus. He thought about Lena's laugh, the way she'd stolen the last piece of bread with zero remorse, the careful efficiency of her movements, and the wall she'd dropped just enough to let him see what was underneath. Cameron noticed. Of course he noticed. You're doing it again, he said on Monday night while they ate takeout Thai food in the kitchen. Doing what? Smiling at your phone. Adrian looked down. Sure enough, Lena had just texted him a photo of Hemingway sitting in a box that was clearly too small for him, with the caption, "He's been like this for 20 minutes. Send help." I'm not smiling. You're totally smiling. Adrian set the phone face down. Eat your pad thai. Is it Lena? Maybe. Are you seeing her again? Tomorrow, dinner. Cameron's face lit up. Can I come? No. Why not? Because it's... Adrian stopped. He'd been about to say a date, but that felt too definitive, too much like something he'd have to defend. Because it's just us this time. So it is a date. Cameron, it's okay, Dad. I like her. You should date her. Adrian looked at his son, who was grinning around a mouthful of noodles like he'd just won an argument. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You're just now paying attention." Adrian laughed. The kid was definitely spending too much time with Mrs. Chen. Tuesday arrived with typical Seattle weather, gray skies threatening rain but not quite committing. Adrian left work early, which earned him some raised eyebrows from his assistant, but he didn't care. He picked Lena up at 6 on the dot, finding her waiting outside her building in dark jeans and a blue sweater that made her eyes look almost gold. "Punctual," she observed as he helped with her wheelchair. "I try. Where are we going?" "You'll see." "Still with the mysterious thing. You said you didn't like surprises." "I don't. And yet here we are." Lena shook her head, smiling. "You're trouble." "I've been called worse." Adrian drove them to the waterfront to a small seafood place that hung out over the water on ancient pilings. It wasn't fancy, picnic tables and paper towels instead of napkins, but the fish was fresh and the view was unbeatable. "Okay," Lena admitted as they settled at a table by the window. "This is a good surprise." "Told you." They ordered halibut and chips, clam chowder that came in bread bowls, beer that tasted like the Pacific Northwest. The sun was setting over the Sound, painting everything orange and pink and gold. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said. "That depends on what it is." "Why third grade, specifically?" Lena looked surprised. "That's what you want to know?" "Yeah." She thought about it, swirling her beer. "Because they're still young enough to be excited about learning, but old enough to have real conversations. They ask the best questions. Weird questions, like why is the sky blue? But also why do people hurt each other? They haven't learned to censor themselves yet." "Sounds exhausting." "It is, but it's also—" She stopped, searching for words. "It's honest. They don't lie about how they feel. If they're sad, they cry. If they're mad, they yell. If they like you, they tell you. Adults don't do that." "No, we don't." Lena met his eyes. "Why not?" "Because we've learned it's safer not to." "Is it, though? Safer?" Adrian thought about his marriage, about all the things he and Vanessa hadn't said until it was too late, about the careful distance he kept from most people, the walls he'd built so high that sometimes he forgot what it felt like to be on the other side of them. "No," he said finally. "Probably not." They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Lena told him about a student who'd brought a pet rock to class and insisted it needed to take the spelling test too. Adrian told her about a business deal that had almost fallen through because one of the investors thought Adrian was too young to know what he was doing. "How old were you?" Lena asked. 26. "Were you too young?" "Probably, but I did it anyway." "And?" "Made a fortune, lost most of it in the next 2 years. Made it back again." Lena studied him. "Do you ever regret it? Moving that fast?" Adrian considered the question. "Sometimes. I missed a lot. Birthdays, holidays, normal life stuff. By the time I looked up, I was 30 and divorced and had a son I barely knew." "But you know him now." "I'm trying to. He's a good kid. Better than I was at his age." "I doubt that." "You didn't know me at 8. I was a nightmare." Lena smiled. "Somehow I believe that." They finished dinner as the last light faded from the sky. The restaurant was getting crowded, voices rising around them, but Adrian barely noticed. He was too focused on Lena, on the way she gestured when she talked, the way her whole face changed when she laughed. "I should probably get home," Lena said eventually, though she didn't move to leave. "I have school tomorrow, stack of quizzes to grade." "On what?" "Multiplication tables, thrilling stuff." "Sounds it." They walked, or wheeled, in Lena's case, back to the car through streets that were busy with Tuesday night crowds. Adrian found himself walking slower than usual, not wanting the evening to end. When they reached her building, Adrian helped Lena transfer to her wheelchair, and they sat there for a moment in the glow of the streetlights. "Thank you," Lena said. "Again, this was—" "If you say nice, I'm going to be offended." She laughed. "I was going to say perfect." "Oh, that's better." "I'm very confident." "Hopeful, remember?" Lena reached out and touched his hand, just briefly. "I like hopeful." Adrian's breath caught. Yeah? Yeah. They looked at each other, and Adrian felt the air shift between them, becoming charged with all the things neither of them was quite ready to say out loud. I should go, Lena said, but she didn't move. Yeah. I have quizzes to grade. Right. And you probably have billionaire things to do. Probably. Neither of them moved. Then Lena leaned forward, just slightly, and kissed him. It was quick, almost tentative, but it sent electricity through Adrian's entire nervous system. Good night, Adrian, she said, pulling back with a smile that was equal parts nervous and pleased with herself. Good night, Lena. She wheeled toward the building, then stopped and looked back. Same time next week? How about Friday? Friday works. Adrian watched her disappear into the building, his hand still tingling where she'd touched it, his lips still warm from the kiss. He sat there in the car for a full minute, trying to remember the last time someone had made him feel like this. He couldn't. When he got home, Cameron was already in bed, but Mrs. Chen was waiting with that knowing look she'd perfected. Good date? She asked. Yeah, Adrian said. Really good. You're smiling again. I know. Mrs. Chen patted his arm. Good. Keep smiling. It looks good on you. Adrian went upstairs and checked on Cameron, who was actually asleep this time, then went to his own room and collapsed on the bed. His phone buzzed. I kissed you. Was that okay? Adrian smiled and typed back, more than okay. Good. Because I've been thinking about doing that since Saturday. Why didn't you? Wasn't sure you wanted me to. I wanted you to. Good to know. Adrian set the phone down, still smiling like an idiot, and stared at the ceiling. This was happening. Whatever this was, it was actually happening. And for once, Adrian Vale, who had learned to plan everything, to strategize and calculate, and never take unnecessary risks, had absolutely no idea what came next. But he was okay with that. More than okay. He was hopeful. Friday came with actual sunshine, which in Seattle felt like a minor miracle. Adrian left the office at noon, claiming a family emergency to his assistant, who gave him a look that said she knew exactly what kind of emergency involved him checking his reflection in every available surface. You're terrible at lying, she'd said. I'm not lying. Cameron counts as family. Cameron's at school until 3. Adrian had given up and left. Now he was standing in his closet again, which was becoming a disturbing pattern. His phone buzzed. Lena. Still picking me up at 7, or did you come to your senses? He typed back. Definitely still picking you up. Though I'm questioning my sanity for other reasons. Which are? I've changed shirts 4 times. Only 4? Amateur. Adrian smiled and went with the dark blue button-down that Cameron had once said made him look less scary. He was learning to trust the kid's judgment on these things. The afternoon dragged. He picked Cameron up from school and took him to get ice cream, which was really just an excuse to kill time until Mrs. Chen could come over. You're nervous again, Cameron observed, attacking a chocolate cone with impressive efficiency. I'm not nervous. Your leg is bouncing. It always bounces when you're nervous. Adrian looked down and realized Cameron was right. He stilled his leg. I'm just thinking. About Lena? About work? Liar. Adrian shot his son a look. When did you get so perceptive? I've always been perceptive. You're just noticing now. You've been talking to Mrs. Chen too much. Cameron grinned, chocolate smeared across his chin. She says you needed someone to knock sense into you. Is Lena knocking sense into you? That's not... Adrian stopped, considered. Maybe, yeah, maybe she is. Good. You need it. By 6:30, Adrian was in the car and heading toward Capitol Hill, his stomach doing things that felt uncomfortably like butterflies. He hadn't felt like this since high school, since before he'd learned to bury everything under layers of control and calculation. It was terrifying. It was also kind of great. Lena was waiting outside again, wearing a dark red dress that made Adrian forget how to form complete sentences for a solid 10 seconds. Her hair was down, curling slightly at the ends, and she'd done something with her eyes that made them look enormous. You look, Adrian started. If you say beautiful again, I'm going to think you don't know any other words. Stunning. Better. How about remarkable? Now you're showing off. Adrian smiled and helped her into the car, the routine already becoming familiar. Wheelchair in the trunk, pillow behind her back. Seatbelt clicked. They'd done this enough times now that it felt almost choreographed. "Where are we going?" Lena asked as Adrian pulled into traffic. "Not telling." "Adrian, it's a surprise." "I told you I don't like surprises, I know. You'll like this one." "You keep saying that because it keeps being true." Lena shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're very sure of yourself." "I'm hopeful, remember?" They drove north, out of the city, and into the hills where the houses got bigger and the streets got quieter. Lena watched the scenery change, her expression shifting from curious to confused to something that might have been nervous. "Adrian, where are we going?" "My place. I made dinner." She turned to look at him. "You cooked?" "I can cook. I'm not completely useless." "That's not what I—" She stopped, took a breath. "This is your house?" They'd pulled up to the gate. Adrian punched in the code and it swung open, revealing the long driveway that led to a house that was definitely too big for two people, but which Adrian had bought anyway because Vanessa had insisted they needed the space. "Yeah," he said quietly. "This is it." Lena stared as they approached the house, all glass and steel and sharp modern lines that looked like something out of an architecture magazine. "You said you worked in tech." "I do." "You didn't mention you were—" She gestured at the house. "This." Adrian killed the engine and turned to face her. "Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Why?" Lena looked down at her hands. "Because this is— Adrian, this is a different world. Your world. I don't know if I fit here." "Cameron fits here. You like Cameron." "That's not the same thing, isn't it?" They sat in silence for a moment, and Adrian could feel something shifting between them, some invisible line being drawn that they'd have to decide whether to cross. "Come inside," Adrian said finally. "Have dinner. Meet Cameron properly. And if you hate it, if this whole thing feels wrong, I'll drive you home and we can pretend this never happened." "Can we do that? Just pretend?" "No, probably not, but we can try." Lena looked at him, then at the house, then back at him. "You really cooked?" "I really cooked." "What did you make?" "Guess you'll have to come inside to find out." She held his gaze for another moment, and Adrian could see her making the decision in real time, whether to run or stay, whether to let this be something or keep it safely in the realm of casual dating. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, let's go inside." Adrian exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The house was wheelchair accessible. Adrian had made sure of that after the divorce, when he'd had to fight for custody and wanted to prove he could provide for Cameron regardless of circumstances. There was a ramp at the side entrance, an elevator to the second floor, wide doorways throughout. Lena was quiet as they entered, taking in the high ceilings and open floor plan, the wall of windows that looked out over the Sound. Hemingway would have fit right in here, Adrian thought randomly. The cat would probably claim the entire couch as his throne. "Dad!" Cameron came running from the direction of the kitchen, then skidded to a stop when he saw Lena. "Lena, you're here!" "Hi, Cameron." Lena's face lit up in a way that made Adrian's chest ache. "I hear your dad's cooking dinner." "He's been cooking for like 3 hours. The kitchen smells weird but good." "That's promising." Cameron looked between them, grinning. "This is a date, right? A real one?" "Cameron," Adrian warned. "What? It is." "Why don't you show Lena around while I check on dinner?" "Can I show her my room?" Adrian hesitated. Having Lena see Cameron's room felt significant somehow, like letting her into a part of their lives that he usually kept carefully separate from everything else. "If she wants to see it," he said finally. Lena smiled. "I'd love to." Adrian left them there and headed to the kitchen, where the chicken he'd been roasting was probably about 5 minutes from crossing the line from golden brown to burned. He'd attempted mashed potatoes and green beans, which seemed simple enough until he'd actually started cooking and realized he had no idea what he was doing. Mrs. Chen had offered to help. Adrian had politely declined. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it himself, disasters and all. 20 minutes later, Cameron and Lena wheeled into the kitchen. Cameron was talking animatedly about his Lego collection while Lena listened with the kind of focused attention that Adrian was starting to recognize as her default setting. "Something smells good," Lena said. "Don't jinx it. I'm not confident about the potatoes." Did you use real potatoes or boxed? Real. I'm not a heathen. Did you add butter? Yes. Milk? Yes. Then they're probably fine. Adrian plated the food with more care than he'd ever given a business presentation. The chicken looked decent. The green beans were slightly overcooked but edible. The potatoes were lumpy but tasted okay when he'd snuck a bite earlier. They ate in the dining room, which Adrian almost never used. It felt too formal, too much like the kind of dinner parties Vanessa used to throw where everyone wore cocktail attire and talked about wine regions. But tonight, it felt right. The three of them around the table, Cameron monopolizing the conversation while Lena asked him questions about school and Legos and his favorite movies. "This is really good," Lena said, and Adrian could tell she meant it. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised. You're a billionaire who can cook. That feels unfair." "I told you, I lived on ramen for 6 months. You learn things." Cameron looked up from his chicken. "Can Lena come over more? I like when she's here." Adrian glanced at Lena, who had gone very still. "That's up to her, buddy." "Would you?" Cameron asked Lena directly. "Want to come over more?" Lena set down her fork. "I'd like that, if your dad's okay with it." "I'm okay with it," Adrian said quietly. Something passed between them then, some unspoken agreement that this was becoming real, that they were choosing to let it be real. After dinner, Cameron insisted on showing Lena his favorite movie, which turned out to be an animated film about a robot that Adrian had seen approximately 70 times and could probably recite from memory. They settled in the living room, Cameron on the couch, Lena beside him in her wheelchair, Adrian in the armchair trying not to be obvious about watching them instead of the screen. Halfway through, Cameron fell asleep against Lena's arm. She didn't move, just adjusted her position slightly to make him more comfortable and kept watching the movie like having an 8-year-old drooling on her was the most natural thing in the world. Adrian's chest did that aching thing again. When the credits rolled, he carefully extracted Cameron and carried him upstairs to bed. The kid barely stirred, just mumbled something about robots and went back to sleep. Adrian pulled the blanket up and stood there for a moment, looking at his son and thinking about how much had changed in 2 weeks. When he came back downstairs, Lena was by the windows, looking out at the lights of Seattle spread below them like a constellation. "This view," she said without turning around. "I could look at this forever." Adrian crossed the room to stand beside her. "It's why I bought the house. Vanessa wanted something in Madison Park, all traditional and elegant. I wanted this." "Did you compromise?" "We bought this." She hated it, complained about it being too modern, too cold, too much glass. After the divorce, she couldn't wait to leave. Lena glanced at him. "But you stayed." "Yeah, I stayed." "Why?" Adrian thought about it. "Because it's mine. Not ours, not hers. Mine. And Cameron's. That mattered." They stood there in silence, watching the city lights, and Adrian felt the space between them humming with things unsaid. "I'm scared," Lena said finally, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Of what?" "This. You. All of it." She turned to face him. "I'm scared that I'm going to wake up and realize this is too good to be real. That you're too good to be real. That any minute now you're going to see me the way everyone else does and decide it's not worth the trouble." Adrian's chest tightened. "Lena, I know that's not fair to you. I know you've done nothing but show up and be kind, and—" She stopped, her voice catching. "But I can't help it. I've been here before. Not with someone like you, not exactly, but I've been the person who wasn't enough, and I'm terrified of being that person again." Adrian took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" "I'm not sure." "I see someone who got dealt a terrible hand and decided to keep playing anyway. Someone who teaches third graders and makes terrible jokes and kisses guys in cars when she's nervous." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I see someone who made my kid laugh for the first time in months. Someone who fits into my life in ways I didn't know I needed." Lena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Adrian, I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying I know what I'm doing, because I don't. I've been divorced for 3 years, and I haven't dated anyone seriously because I couldn't figure out how to let someone in. But then you showed up in that restaurant looking terrified and trying so hard to hold it together, and I—" He stopped, searching for the right words. "I couldn't look away, and I don't want to. What if I disappoint you?" What if you don't? Lena let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. When did you get so optimistic? I'm not optimistic. I'm terrified too. But I'm also hopeful, and right now hopeful feels like enough. She looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian could see her deciding again, weighing the risk against the possibility of something real. Then she kissed him. It wasn't like the quick kiss in the car. This one was deeper, slower, full of all the things neither of them knew how to say out loud. Adrian's hands found her waist, and she reached up to cup his face, and for a moment everything else fell away. The house, the view, the fear, all of it. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Okay, Lena whispered. Okay? Okay, I'm in. I'm scared, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm in. Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Yeah? Yeah. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped up in each other while the city sparkled below them. Eventually, Lena pulled back, wiping at her eyes. I should probably go. It's late. Stay. She looked at him startled. Adrian, not like that. I have a guest room. Multiple guest rooms. Stay. Have breakfast with us. Let Cameron show you his Lego collection properly. He'll be devastated if you leave before he wakes up. Is that the only reason? No. I want you to stay. I want to wake up knowing you're here. Is that too much? Lena bit her lip. My cat's going to be pissed. We'll pick him up tomorrow. Bring him here for the weekend. You want my cat in your house? I want you in my house. The cat's part of the package. She laughed, and Adrian felt the last of the tension between them dissolve. Okay, I'll stay, but I'm sleeping in the guest room. Wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise. And if Cameron asks, I'll tell him the truth, that you stayed over because it was late and we wanted you to have breakfast with us. That simple? That's simple. Adrian showed her to the guest room, one of 4, because Vanessa had insisted they needed space for guests who never materialized, and found her a toothbrush and one of his old t-shirts to sleep in. She disappeared into the attached bathroom while Adrian went to his own room and changed into sweats, his mind racing. She was staying. She was actually staying. He brushed his teeth and stared at himself in the mirror, trying to recognize the man looking back at him. When had he become this person? This guy who invited women to stay over and cooked dinner and felt his heart race at the thought of breakfast tomorrow morning. His phone buzzed. Lena, this t-shirt is huge on me. Sorry. It's all I had. I'm not complaining. It's comfortable. Adrian smiled and typed, Good night, Lena. Good night. Thank you for tonight. All of it. Thank you for staying. Adrian set his phone on the nightstand and lay back, staring at the ceiling. She was down the hall, in his house, wearing his t-shirt. The thought made him feel like a teenager again, all nervous energy and possibility. He must have eventually fallen asleep because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows and he could hear voices downstairs. Cameron's high-pitched excitement and Lena's lower, amused responses. Adrian pulled on a t-shirt and headed down to find them in the kitchen. Cameron was showing Lena how to make his special pancakes, which apparently involved chocolate chips and way too much syrup. Lena was following his instructions with exaggerated seriousness, asking questions about measurements and technique while Cameron beamed with pride. Morning, Adrian said from the doorway. They both turned. Cameron grinned. Dad, Lena's making breakfast. I see that. How's it going? She's a natural, Cameron declared. Better than you. That's not a high bar, Lena said, flipping a pancake with more confidence than Adrian would have expected. Your dad burns toast. How did you know that? Lucky guess. They ate breakfast on the back deck, overlooking the garden that Adrian paid someone to maintain because he'd never had time to learn. The morning was cool but sunny, and Cameron was in rare form, telling stories about school and asking Lena approximately 800 questions about teaching. Do you give homework on Fridays? He asked. Sometimes. Why? Ms. Patterson gives us homework every Friday. It's cruel. It's 2 math problems, Cameron, Adrian said. Too many. Lena laughed. I'll make you a deal. When you're in my class, if you're ever in my class, I'll think about the Friday homework situation. Promise? I promise to think about it. Cameron considered this, then nodded. Fair. After breakfast, they picked up Hemingway from Lena's apartment. The cat took one look at Adrian's house and immediately claimed the largest couch as his new kingdom. Cameron was delighted. Hemingway was unimpressed, but willing to tolerate them. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal. They took Cameron to the aquarium, where Lena knew an absurd amount about sea creatures, and Cameron hung on her every word. They ordered pizza and watched movies. They existed together in a way that felt easy and right and terrifying in its simplicity. Sunday evening, after Cameron was in bed and Hemingway was snoring on the couch, Adrian drove Lena home. They sat in the car outside her building, neither wanting the weekend to end. "Thank you," Lena said, "for this, for all of it." "You keep thanking me." "Because I keep meaning it." Adrian reached across the console and took her hand. "I want to do this, really do this. Not just dates and dinners, but—" He stopped, trying to find the words. "I want you in my life, in Cameron's life. I want this to be real." Lena squeezed his hand. "It already is real." "Yeah, it is." She leaned across and kissed him, soft and quick. "I'll see you this week?" "Definitely." Adrian helped her with her wheelchair and watched her disappear into the building, Hemingway's carrier in her lap. When she was gone, he sat in the car for a long moment, feeling something settle in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Maybe. Or something close to it. He drove home through quiet streets, thinking about the weekend, about the way Lena had fit into his life like she'd always been there, about the way Cameron had looked at her like she was the coolest person in the world, about the way his too-big house had felt full for the first time since the divorce. When he got home, Mrs. Chen was waiting with that knowing smile. "Good weekend?" she asked. "Really good." She stayed over. It wasn't a question. In the guest room. "Of course." Mrs. Chen patted his arm. "She's good for you. For Cameron, too." "Yeah, she is." "So don't mess it up." Adrian laughed. "I'll try not to." He went upstairs and checked on Cameron, who was asleep with a book about sea creatures that Lena had bought him at the aquarium gift shop. Adrian moved it to the nightstand and pulled up the blanket, then stood there looking at his son and thinking about how much had changed. 2 weeks ago, he'd been going through the motions. Work, custody arrangements, the endless grind of responsibility without joy. Now he had Lena's number in his phone and plans for Tuesday night and a weekend that had felt like something out of someone else's life. His phone buzzed. "Lena. Made it home. Hemingway is sulking about leaving his new kingdom. He's welcome back anytime." "Just him?" "You too, I guess." "Wow, such enthusiasm." Adrian smiled and typed, "You know what I mean. I do. And I feel the same way." "Good." "Adrian? Yeah? I'm falling for you. Just thought you should know." Adrian stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on the truth. "I'm falling for you too." "Good. That makes this less terrifying, only slightly less terrifying. Fair enough? Good night." "Good night, Lena." Adrian set his phone down and lay back on the bed, feeling something crack open in his chest that he'd kept carefully sealed for years. Falling for her. He was falling for her. Maybe had been since that first night at the restaurant, watching her hold herself together when everything was falling apart. It was fast. Too fast, probably. His lawyer would tell him to be careful, to protect his assets, to think about what this could mean if it all went wrong. But lying there in the dark, all Adrian could think about was the way Lena had looked at him across the dinner table, the way she'd fit against him when they kissed, the way she'd made Cameron laugh. For the first time in 3 years, Adrian Vale let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved to be happy. And maybe, hopeful, always hopeful, so did she. The crash came on a Wednesday. Not a literal crash, though later Adrian would think that might have been easier to deal with. This was the kind of crash that happened in conference rooms with lawyers and spreadsheets, the kind where you watched months of work dissolve because someone 3,000 miles away changed their mind. Adrian sat in his office staring at the email that had arrived at 6 in the morning. The acquisition deal, the one he'd been working on for 8 months, the one that was supposed to cement Vale Industries' position in the market, was dead. The other company's board had voted to go with a competitor. Just like that. Done. His phone buzzed. Lena. Good morning. Cameron left his math book here. Should I drop it off at school or bring it tonight? Adrian stared at the message, trying to shift gears from corporate disaster to domestic logistics. They'd been doing this for 3 weeks now. The casual texts, the easy back and forth, the way she'd started keeping a toothbrush at his place and he'd started keeping coffee she liked in his kitchen. It had become normal, comfortable. And right now, Adrian couldn't handle comfortable. He typed, "Just take it to school. I'll be late tonight. Everything okay? Work stuff. I'll call you later." He set the phone down before she could respond and turned back to his computer, already pulling up damage control plans. By noon, he'd had 3 conference calls and fired off approximately 60 emails. By 3, his assistant had stopped asking if he wanted lunch. By 5, when Cameron's school called to say he'd forgotten his math book and could someone bring it, Adrian snapped at the secretary in a way that made him immediately feel like garbage. "I'll handle it," he said, forcing his voice level. "Sorry. Long day." "No problem, Mr. Vale. He just needs it for homework tonight." Adrian hung up and called Lena. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I was just about to... Did you take Cameron's math book to school?" There was a pause. "No, you said you'd be late, so I thought, they just called. He needs it for homework." "Oh, I'm sorry, I can run it over now, but don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. Adrian, it's not a problem. I'm literally 10 minutes from the school." "I said I'll handle it." Another pause, longer this time. When Lena spoke again, her voice was careful. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine. I just have a lot going on." "Okay, call me later?" "Yeah, later." He hung up before she could say anything else and immediately hated himself for it. She was trying to help. She'd been nothing but helpful for 3 weeks, fitting into his life like she belonged there, making everything easier instead of harder. And he'd just shut her down like she was an annoyance. Adrian grabbed his keys and headed out, driving to Lena's apartment to get the math book himself because he was apparently committed to making this day as difficult as possible. He let himself in with the key she'd given him last week, another marker of how serious this had gotten, and found the book on her kitchen table next to a half-graded stack of spelling tests. He should leave a note, apologize for being short with her, explain about the deal falling through. Instead, he grabbed the book and left. Cameron was waiting in the after-school program when Adrian arrived, playing cards with 2 other kids. He looked up when he saw his dad, his face brightening before falling when he registered Adrian's expression. "Hey, buddy," Adrian said, holding up the math book. "Got your book?" "Thanks." Cameron took it, then hesitated. "Are you mad?" "No, why would I be mad?" "You look mad." Adrian forced a smile. "Just tired. Long day. Ready to go home?" The drive home was quiet. Cameron asked about homework and dinner and whether Lena was coming over, and Adrian answered in monosyllables until Cameron gave up and stared out the window. When they got home, Adrian's phone was full of messages. His lawyer, his accountant, his business partner, everyone wanting to know what the plan was, how they were going to recover, what came next. And one from Lena. "Let me know if you need anything." Adrian set the phone face down and went to make dinner, which turned out to be a mistake because he burned the chicken and the smoke alarm went off and Cameron looked at him like he was a stranger. "Dad, are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't seem fine." "Cameron, I said I'm fine. Can you just—" Adrian stopped, took a breath. "Can you just do your homework, please?" Cameron's face closed off in that way kids' faces do when they're hurt but trying not to show it. "Okay." He disappeared upstairs, and Adrian stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by burned chicken and the wreckage of a day that refused to end. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. By the time he got Cameron to bed, a process that involved minimal conversation and maximum tension, it was after 9. Adrian poured himself a scotch and sat in the dark living room, staring at the city lights and feeling the weight of the day settle on his shoulders like concrete. His phone rang. Lena. He should answer. He knew he should answer. She'd been nothing but patient and kind and understanding, and he was shutting her out over a business deal like an idiot. He let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, she called again. Adrian answered this time, mostly because he knew she'd just keep calling. Hey, don't hey me like nothing's wrong, Lena said, and there was an edge to her voice he'd never heard before. You've been weird all day and you won't talk to me. What's going on? I told you, work stuff. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Adrian, Lena, I don't want to do this tonight. I'm tired and I had a terrible day and I just need... He stopped, not sure what he needed. I just need space. The silence on the other end was deafening. Space, Lena repeated finally. Okay, how much space? I don't know. A few days maybe? I need to figure some things out. Figure what out? Adrian didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. What was he figuring out? How to salvage a business deal, how to stop feeling like he was drowning, how to be the person Lena deserved when he could barely hold himself together. You know what? Lena's voice was tight now, controlled. Fine. Take your space. But Adrian, when you're done figuring things out, you should think about whether you actually want this. Because I can handle a lot. I can handle bad days and work stress and all of it. What I can't handle is being shut out every time things get hard. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? Adrian closed his eyes. Lena, call me when you're ready to actually talk. Not at me, not around things, but actually talk. She hung up before he could respond. Adrian sat there with the phone in his hand, feeling like he'd just stepped off a cliff. He'd done exactly what he'd promised himself he wouldn't do, pushed her away the minute things got complicated. And the worst part was he knew it. He could see himself doing it, could hear his ex-wife's voice in his head saying this was exactly why their marriage had failed, and he still couldn't seem to stop. He drained his scotch and poured another. The next day was worse. The deal was still dead, the board was demanding answers he didn't have, and Cameron barely spoke to him at breakfast. Adrian went through the motions at work, took calls and attended meetings, and signed documents, but his mind was somewhere else. On Lena. On the way her voice had sounded on the phone, on the fact that he'd heard her and then been too proud or too stupid or too scared to apologize. His assistant knocked on his door around 3. Mr. Vale, your 4 o'clock is here. Adrian looked at his calendar and saw Vanessa's name. Right, custody discussion. Because apparently this week wasn't terrible enough. Vanessa swept into his office like she owned it, all designer clothes and expensive perfume. They'd been divorced for 3 years and she still moved through his space like it was hers. Adrian, she said, sitting without being invited, we need to talk about Christmas. It's September, and these things take planning. My mother wants Cameron for Christmas Eve. That's my week. I know, that's why we need to talk about it. Adrian rubbed his temples. Vanessa, can we do this another time? I'm in the middle of... You're always in the middle of something. She crossed her legs, studying him. You look terrible, by the way. Thanks. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? I don't know. Tuesday? Vanessa's expression shifted, something almost like concern crossing her face. What's going on? The Meridian deal fell through. Oh. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. I know you put a lot into that. Yeah. Is that why you're... She gestured vaguely at him. Like this? Adrian wanted to say yes. Wanted to blame everything on work, on the deal, on external factors he couldn't control. But sitting there across from his ex-wife, he realized that wasn't quite true. I met someone, he said. Vanessa's eyebrows rose. You did? 3 weeks ago. Her name's Lena. She's a teacher. And I think I'm screwing it up. Vanessa leaned back, and Adrian could see her processing this. They'd been terrible together, but she'd known him for 10 years. She could read him better than almost anyone. How? She asked. The usual way. She wants me to talk about things. I want to pretend everything's fine. She wants to help. I want to handle it myself. So basically, you're doing exactly what you did with us. Adrian flinched. Yeah, basically. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You know what your problem is, Adrian? I'm sure you're about to tell me. You think needing people makes you weak. You've always thought that. It's why you worked 80-hour weeks while we were married. It's why you never asked for help even when you were drowning. And it's why you're sitting here looking like death instead of calling this woman and telling her what's actually going on. Adrian didn't have a response to that. Vanessa stood up, smoothing her skirt. We'll talk about Christmas later. You have bigger problems right now. Thanks for the pep talk. Adrian. She paused at the door. If you actually like her, don't do what you did to us. Don't wait until it's too late to figure out that you can't do everything alone. She left, and Adrian sat there feeling like he'd been gutted. He left work early and picked Cameron up from school himself, which earned him a surprised look from his son. Where's Lena? Cameron asked as they drove home. She's not coming today. Why not? Because Adrian stopped. Because I messed up. Cameron was quiet for a minute. Then, did you guys break up? No, I don't know. Maybe. Are you going to fix it? I'm going to try. Good. I like her. I know you do, buddy. Do you like her? Adrian glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. Yeah, I really do. Then you should tell her that, instead of being weird and mad all the time. Adrian almost laughed. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You keep asking me that. They got home and Adrian ordered pizza because he didn't trust himself not to burn something else. After dinner, after Cameron was in bed, Adrian sat on the couch with his phone in his hand, staring at Lena's contact. He could text, keep it casual, keep his distance, protect himself. Or he could actually do what she'd asked. Talk. Really talk. Risk being vulnerable and honest and all the things that terrified him. Adrian hit call before he could talk himself out of it. Lena answered on the fourth ring. Hi. Hi. Can we talk? I thought you needed space. I did. I do. But I also... Adrian took a breath. I also need to apologize for Wednesday, for being an asshole, for shutting you out. Okay. Her voice was carefully neutral. I'm listening. The deal I'd been working on for 8 months fell through. The other company went with a competitor. I found out Wednesday morning and I spiraled. And instead of telling you that, instead of letting you help, I pushed you away. Like I always do. Why? Because that's what I know how to do. When things get hard, I handle it myself. I don't ask for help. I don't burden other people with my problems. He stopped, struggling. It's how I've survived for 20 years. Lena was quiet for a moment. That sounds exhausting. It is. So why do you keep doing it? Adrian thought about Vanessa's words, about growing up poor and learning early that you couldn't count on anyone but yourself, about building a company from nothing and having everyone tell him he'd fail, about watching his marriage fall apart because he couldn't let his wife in. Because being vulnerable feels dangerous, he said finally, and I've spent my whole life trying to be in control. And how's that working out for you? Adrian laughed hollow. Not great, apparently. Adrian, Lena's voice softened. I get it. I really do. You think I don't understand what it's like to feel like you have to do everything yourself? I've been in a wheelchair for 3 years. I know about independence and pride and not wanting to ask for help. Then you understand. No, I understand the impulse, but I also understand that it's bullshit. That stopped him. What? It's bullshit, Lena repeated. The idea that you have to handle everything alone, that needing people makes you weak, that vulnerability is dangerous. It's all bullshit. You know what's actually dangerous? Pushing away everyone who tries to care about you until you're completely alone. Adrian didn't say anything. I like you, Lena continued. I really like you, but I can't be with someone who shuts me out every time things get hard. I've been that person, the one who gets pushed away, and I won't do it again. I don't want to push you away. Then don't. Talk to me. Tell me when you're having a bad day. Let me help. Let me in. What if I don't know how? Then you learn. We both learn. Because what we're doing, it only works if we're actually doing it together. Adrian closed his eyes, feeling something crack open in his chest. I'm scared. Of what? That I'm going to screw this up. That I'm going to hurt you, that I'm going to turn into the same person I was with Vanessa. You're not that person anymore. How do you know? Because that person wouldn't be calling me right now. That person wouldn't be admitting he's scared. Lena paused. And because Cameron told me you've been different since we met. Happier. More there. You talked to Cameron? He called me yesterday, asked if we broke up. I told him we were working through some things. What did he say? That you were being an idiot and I should give you another chance. Adrian laughed despite himself. Those were his exact words? More or less. They were quiet for a moment, and Adrian could feel the space between them shifting, becoming something different than it had been. I want to do better, Adrian said finally. I want to learn how to let you in. I'm not good at it. Then we'll practice, together. You're willing to do that? After I was such an asshole? Adrian, I've dated guys who walked out because of a wheelchair. You had a bad day and pushed me away because you're scared of being vulnerable. That's not great, but it's fixable. Just like that? Not just like that. You're going to have to actually work at this. Talk to me when things are hard. Let me help. Stop trying to handle everything alone. I can do that. Can you? Adrian thought about it, really thought about it, about what it would mean to let someone in, to be honest about his fears and failures, to admit when he needed help. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I can try, he said. That's all I can promise. But I'll try. Okay? He could hear the smile in her voice. That's enough. Can I see you this weekend? I'd like that. Lena? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for calling, for being honest. They hung up, and Adrian sat there feeling lighter than he had in days. He'd done it, actually done it, admitted he was scared, asked for help, let someone see him struggling, and the world hadn't ended. The next day, Adrian called an emergency board meeting and laid out a new strategy. It wasn't the Meridian deal, but it was something different, maybe better. The board approved it. His business partner clapped him on the shoulder and said it was about damn time Adrian started thinking creatively again. Friday afternoon, Adrian left work at 3 and picked up flowers on his way to Lena's apartment. She opened the door in yoga pants and an old t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun, and Adrian thought she'd never looked more beautiful. Hi, he said, holding out the flowers. Hi yourself. She took them, smiling. These are gorgeous. I'm sorry, again, for being an idiot. I know, Cameron told me you've been practicing your apology speech. Adrian laughed. That kid has a big mouth. He loves you. He wants us to work out. What about you? What do you want? Lena set the flowers on her table and moved closer, reaching up to touch his face. I want you to stop being so scared. I want you to trust me, and I want you to believe that you deserve to be happy. I'm working on it. I know. She pulled him down and kissed him, soft and sweet. And I'm here for all of it. They spent the weekend together. Adrian, Lena, Cameron, and Hemingway, who had fully claimed Adrian's couch as his domain. They didn't do anything special, just watched movies and ate too much takeout and existed together in a way that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Sunday night, after Cameron was asleep and Lena was curled up next to him on the couch, Adrian said, I love you. Lena looked up at him, her eyes wide. What? I love you. I should have said it before. I've probably felt it for weeks, but I was too scared to say it out loud. And now? Now I'm still scared, but I'm saying it anyway. He touched her face, traced her cheekbone with his thumb. I love you, Lena Brooks. You and your terrible cat and your third-grade students and the way you steal the last piece of bread. All of it. Lena's eyes were bright. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and terrible at asking for help and you burn toast, especially because I burn toast? Maybe a little because you burn toast. They kissed, and Adrian felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. This was it. This was what he'd been missing. Not success or money or control, but this. Someone to come home to, someone who saw him struggling and didn't run away, someone who believed he could be better and refused to let him settle for less. Move in with me, Adrian said suddenly. Lena pulled back. What? Move in. You and Hemingway, this weekend, next month, whenever, just be here. With us. Adrian, that's fast. I know, and if you want to wait, we can wait. But I'm tired of pretending this isn't serious. I'm tired of half measures. I want you here. Cameron wants you here. Even the cat seems to prefer this couch. Lena bit her lip, and Adrian could see her thinking it through, weighing the risk against the possibility. Can I think about it? She asked finally. Of course. Not because I don't want to, just because you want to be sure. I get it. She nodded, then kissed him again. Ask me again in a month. If you still mean it, I'll say yes. I'll still mean it. We'll see. But Adrian knew. He knew the same way he'd known that first night at the restaurant that he couldn't look away. This was real. This was permanent. This was the thing he'd been looking for without knowing he was looking. And a month later, when he asked again, Lena said yes. Moving day happened on a Saturday in October when the rain had finally taken a break, and Seattle looked almost cheerful. Adrian had hired movers, but Lena had insisted on packing most of her stuff herself, which meant boxes were stacked haphazardly in her apartment with labels like kitchen, maybe, and books or clothes, forgot which. You're terrible at this, Adrian observed, looking at a box labeled simply stuff. I'm aware. But Lena was trying to wrangle Hemingway into his carrier, a process the cat was not cooperating with. I've moved twice in my life, and both times were disasters. That's comforting. Oh, relax. Your house is 10 times bigger than this place. We could lose half my stuff and you wouldn't even notice. Cameron was bouncing around the apartment like he'd been mainlining sugar, which he probably had because Mrs. Chen had made cookies that morning and sent them over. Can I help pack? He asked for the 15th time. You can help by not breaking anything, Adrian said. I won't break anything. 5 minutes later, there was a crash from Lena's bedroom. That wasn't me, Cameron called. Adrian closed his eyes. What did you break? Just a lamp, and it was already broken. Lena wheeled past Adrian, shaking her head. This is my life now, chaos and broken lamps. You can still change your mind. She stopped and looked back at him. Do you want me to change my mind? No. Then stop giving me outs. She smiled. I'm in this. Broken lamps and all. The movers showed up at noon and made quick work of the furniture. Lena didn't have much. A bed, a couch that had seen better days, bookshelves that were more books than shelves. Most of it was going into storage because Adrian's house already had furniture, and Lena had admitted she wasn't particularly attached to any of hers. Except the rocking chair, she said, pointing to an old wooden chair in the corner. That was my grandmother's. It goes. Done. By 3 o'clock, the apartment was empty except for cleaning supplies and the kind of sadness that comes with leaving a place you've lived for 3 years. Lena sat in her wheelchair in the middle of the empty living room, looking around with an expression Adrian couldn't quite read. You okay? He asked. Yeah, just weird, you know? This place was supposed to be my fresh start. After the accident, after everything, and now I'm leaving it. Adrian sat down on the floor next to her. Having second thoughts? No, just first thoughts, or maybe third thoughts. I don't know. She looked at him. What if this doesn't work? Then we'll figure it out. That's not a very detailed plan. I'm learning to be okay with that. Lena smiled despite herself. Look at you, growing as a person. I'm trying. Cameron ran in from checking the bathroom one last time. It's all empty. Can we go now? I want to show Lena where we're putting her stuff. We're putting her stuff where she wants it, buddy. But I have ideas. I'm sure you do. They locked up the apartment for the last time and headed to Adrian's house. Their house now, though Lena kept correcting herself when she said it. The movers were already unloading when they arrived. And for the next 2 hours, it was controlled chaos as boxes were moved and furniture was placed, and Hemingway escaped his carrier and disappeared into the house somewhere. He'll turn up, Lena said when Cameron started to panic. He's dramatic. He's probably claiming a new throne as we speak. She was right. They found him an hour later sprawled across Adrian's bed like he owned it. Guess I'm sleeping on the couch, Adrian said. Guess you're not. Lena wheeled past him into the bedroom. Hemingway, move. The cat gave her a look that suggested he'd never been so insulted in his life, but he moved. By evening, most of the boxes were unpacked and the house looked like it had been hit by a tornado, but in a lived-in way that Adrian found himself liking. Lena's books were mixed in with his on the shelves. Her coffee maker was on the counter next to his espresso machine. Her grandmother's rocking chair sat by the window overlooking the sound. They ordered Chinese food and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room because the dining table was covered in boxes. Cameron fell asleep halfway through dinner, exhausted from helping, and Adrian carried him up to bed while Lena started making a dent in the remaining mess. Leave it, Adrian said when he came back down. We can do it tomorrow. I can't leave it like this. It's chaos. So let it be chaos for one night. Lena looked around at the boxes and packing paper and general disaster, then back at Adrian. You're really okay with this? All of it. All of what? Me being here, taking up space, changing things. Adrian crossed the room and knelt down in front of her wheelchair. Lena, I asked you to move in because I wanted you here. Not a version of you that takes up less space. You, all of you, the books and the cat and the chaos. I want all of it. Her eyes were bright. Even when I leave my coffee cups everywhere? Even then. And when Hemingway knocks things off the counter, I'll learn to live with it. And when I have bad days and don't want to talk? Adrian took her hands. Then I'll sit with you until you do. Or until you don't. Whatever you need. Lena leaned forward and kissed him, soft and slow. I love you. I love you too. They sat there in the middle of the chaos, and Adrian thought about how much had changed in 3 months. How he'd gone from eating dinner alone at a restaurant to this, a house full of boxes and books, and a cat that hated him, and a woman who'd somehow become the center of his entire world. It was terrifying. It was perfect. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Lena had her routines, and Adrian had his, and learning to exist in the same space without driving each other crazy required more negotiation than either of them expected. Lena liked to grade papers at the kitchen table. Adrian needed quiet to work. Lena was a morning person. Adrian most definitely was not. Hemingway continued to be an agent of chaos, knocking over Adrian's coffee at least twice a week. But they figured it out. Adrian started working in his office when Lena was grading. Lena started making coffee before Adrian woke up. Hemingway remained terrible, but they learned to accept it. Cameron was thriving. He'd always been a good kid, but with Lena around, he'd opened up in ways Adrian hadn't seen before. He talked more at dinner. He laughed more. He stopped asking when his mom was picking him up and started asking if Lena would be home when he got back from school. Vanessa noticed during a custody exchange in November. He seems happy, she said, watching Cameron run ahead to Adrian's car. He is. Is that because of her, the teacher? Adrian nodded. Lena, yeah. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Good. He deserves that. You both do. It was the kindest thing she'd said to him in years. Thanksgiving came and went. Lena's parents drove up from Portland, and Adrian spent an awkward afternoon trying to convince them he wasn't some rich guy taking advantage of their daughter. Her father, a retired mechanic who looked like he could still throw a punch, had cornered Adrian in the kitchen. You heard her. I don't care how much money you have. Understood? Understood. Good. Her father had clapped him on the shoulder. Now let's go see if she burned the turkey. She had, a little, but they ate it anyway, and her mother told embarrassing stories about Lena as a kid, and Cameron laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair, and Adrian thought this might be what family was supposed to feel like. December brought the custody issue with Vanessa's mother wanting Cameron for Christmas Eve. Adrian and Lena were having coffee one morning when he brought it up. What do you think I should do? He asked. Lena looked up from her lesson plans. About Christmas? Yeah. Vanessa wants me to give up Christmas Eve so Cameron can see her mom. It's technically my time, but family's important. Yeah. What does Cameron want? Adrian hadn't asked. He'd been so focused on the principle of it, that it was his time, that Vanessa couldn't just change the schedule whenever she wanted, that he hadn't actually asked his son what he preferred. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe start there. So that night at dinner, Adrian asked. Cameron thought about it, pushing green beans around his plate. Can I do both? He asked finally. Both? Christmas Eve with Grandma and Grandpa. Christmas morning here. With you guys. You guys. Like they were a unit. Like they were a family. Yeah, Adrian said, his voice rough. Yeah, we can do that. Cameron grinned. Cool. Can we get a real tree this year instead of the fake one? Lena laughed. I think we can manage that. They got the tree the next weekend, a massive thing that barely fit in the living room and shed needles everywhere. Cameron insisted on decorating it immediately, and they spent the afternoon untangling lights and hanging ornaments while Christmas music played and Hemingway tried to climb the tree every 5 minutes. This is a disaster, Adrian said, pulling the cat down for the third time. This is perfect, Lena countered, hanging a wonky ornament Cameron had made in first grade. And looking around at the messy living room and the too big tree and his son laughing while trying to put the star on top, Adrian had to agree. Christmas morning was chaos. Cameron woke them up at 6 by jumping on the bed, which startled Hemingway, who knocked over a lamp, which woke up the whole house. They stumbled downstairs to find presents everywhere. Adrian had maybe gone overboard and spent the next 2 hours opening gifts and drinking coffee and existing in the kind of comfortable happiness that Adrian had stopped believing was possible. Lena gave Adrian a first edition of his favorite sci-fi book, the one with explosions on the cover that Vanessa had always made fun of. Adrian gave Lena a necklace with a small pendant shaped like a book. Cameron gave them both drawings he'd made, and Lena hung hers on the fridge immediately. By noon, the living room looked like a wrapping paper explosion, and Cameron was already playing with his new Lego set, and Adrian found Lena in the kitchen making hot chocolate. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "This. All of it. Making this feel like home." Lena turned to face him. "Adrian, this was home before I got here. You and Cameron, you already had this. I just got lucky enough to be invited in." "That's not true. Isn't it?" Adrian thought about the house before Lena, the 2 quiet dinners, the careful routines, the way he and Cameron had existed together, but not quite connected. "Okay, maybe it's a little true," he admitted. "But you made it better. You made everything better." "Sap. Accurate sap." She kissed him, tasting like hot chocolate in Christmas morning, and Adrian thought about how 3 months ago he'd asked her to move in and she'd said to ask again in a month. How he'd asked every day for that month until she'd finally laughed and said yes. How she'd moved in and turned his too big house into something that actually felt lived in. How he wanted to spend the rest of his life doing this. "Marry me," he said. Lena pulled back. "What?" "Marry me. Not now, not today. Whenever you're ready, but marry me." "Adrian, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I also know I want this. I want you. I want us. And I'm tired of pretending I don't know exactly what I want." Lena stared at him, and Adrian could see her processing, trying to figure out if he was serious. "I don't have a ring," he continued. "I didn't plan this, but I'm asking anyway because..." He stopped trying to find the words. "Because that night at the restaurant, when that guy walked out on you, I saw someone who deserved better. And every day since then I've just wanted to be better. For you, for Cameron, for myself." "Adrian, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. Take all the time you need, but know that I mean it. I love you. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you." Lena's eyes were wet. "You're serious? Completely? You want to marry me? The woman in the wheelchair who comes with a tyrant cat and 50,000 books and students who call it weird hours. I want to marry you because of those things, not despite them." She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "You're terrible at proposing. You know that, right? This is possibly the least romantic proposal in history." "I can do it again. Get down on one knee. The whole thing." "Don't you dare." She grabbed his shirt and pulled him down to her level. "And yes," Adrian's heart stopped. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. You ridiculous, stubborn, wonderful man. Yes." He kissed her, long and deep, and from the living room they heard Cameron yell, "Gross! Stop kissing!" They broke apart laughing, and Lena wheeled toward the living room. "Cameron, guess what?" "What?" "Your dad just asked me to marry him." Cameron looked up from his Legos, his eyes going wide. "Really? Really? And you said yes?" "I said yes." Cameron jumped up and ran over, throwing his arms around Lena in a hug that nearly knocked her out of her wheelchair. "Yes, this is the best Christmas ever." Adrian stood in the doorway watching them, feeling something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. This was it. This was everything he hadn't known he needed. A woman who challenged him and saw through him and loved him anyway. A son who was finally, genuinely happy. A home that felt like more than just a place to sleep. That night, after Cameron was in bed and they were lying together on the couch, Lena said, "When did you know?" "Know what?" "That you wanted to marry me." Adrian thought about it. That first night at the restaurant, when I saw you sitting there after that guy left, and you were trying so hard to hold it together, I didn't know I wanted to marry you specifically, but I knew I couldn't walk away. That's not very romantic either. I'm working on it. She laughed and curled closer to him. What are we going to tell people? That you proposed in your kitchen on Christmas morning without a ring? We'll tell them the truth, that I asked and you said yes and nothing else mattered. Your ex-wife is going to have opinions. Vanessa always has opinions. She'll get over it. What about your board, your investors? They're going to think you're crazy, getting engaged this fast. Let them think whatever they want. Adrian kissed the top of her head. I spent too many years caring what other people thought. I'm done with that. They were quiet for a while, just existing together in the dark house. Then Lena said, I need to tell you something. Adrian tensed. Okay. That night, at the restaurant, when that guy walked out, I was so close to leaving, just wheeling out of there and never going back, never trying again. What stopped you? Cameron. He looked at me like I was just a person who needed dinner, not someone to pity or fix or judge. Just a person. She paused. And then you came over and you did the same thing. You just saw me. Not the wheelchair, not the sad story. Just me. That's all I ever saw. I know. That's why I said yes. Because in 4 months, you've never once looked at me like I was less than whole. Even when I felt like I wasn't. Adrian pulled her closer. You've always been whole. You just needed someone to remind you. And you needed someone to remind you that you can't do everything alone. Fair point. They fell asleep on the couch like that, tangled together, Hemingway claiming the armchair because the cat had no concept of personal space. When Adrian woke up a few hours later, his neck stiff and his arm asleep, Lena was still curled against him, breathing deeply. He carefully extracted himself and went to check on Cameron, who was sprawled across his bed with new Legos scattered everywhere. Adrian moved them to the nightstand so the kid wouldn't roll over and impale himself, then stood there looking at his son. Cameron had been 6 when the divorce happened, old enough to understand that something was wrong, too young to fully grasp what it meant. He'd spent 2 years being shuttled between houses, learning to pack a bag every few days, trying to be good enough that maybe his parents would get back together. And now he was 8, sleeping peacefully in a house that had finally started to feel stable, with a dad who was learning to be present and a woman who'd somehow become the closest thing to a mother figure he'd had in years. Adrian's phone buzzed. Lena, from the couch where he'd left her. Did you really just leave me here to go be sentimental about Cameron? He typed back, maybe. Sap, you already said that. It bears repeating. Come back to bed. The real bed this time. My neck is killing me. Adrian smiled and headed back downstairs, helping Lena transfer to her wheelchair and then following her up to their bedroom. They got ready for bed with the kind of easy routine that comes from living together, and when they finally settled in, Hemingway immediately claimed the foot of the bed. We're going to have to get a bigger bed, Adrian observed, or a smaller cat. Good luck with that. Lena laughed and turned off the light. In the darkness, she said, Adrian? Yeah? Thank you for seeing me, for not walking away, for asking me to marry you in your kitchen without a ring. Thank you for saying yes. I love you. I love you too. The engagement was official by New Year's. Adrian bought a ring, a simple platinum band with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious because Lena would have hated that, and proposed again, properly this time, at the same spot by the water where he'd taken her on their second date. This is better, Lena said, looking at the ring on her finger. Better than the kitchen? Different better. Kitchen was spontaneous. This is romantic. I can do both. So I'm learning. They set a date for June. Nothing huge, nothing fancy. Just friends and family and the people who mattered. Lena's parents cried when she told them. Cameron asked if he could be the ring bearer. Vanessa sent a text that said simply, "Congrats, don't screw it up." Adrian didn't plan to. The next few months were a blur of wedding planning and work and normal life. Lena's students found out she was engaged and made her cards. Cameron practiced walking down the aisle with the rings. Hemingway continued to be terrible, knocking over the sample centerpieces Lena brought home. In March, Adrian got a call from the company that had beat him on the Meridian deal. They were having problems. Major problems. Did Adrian want to talk about a potential merger? He did. But he also made sure he was home for dinner every night. Made sure he talked to Lena when things got stressful. Made sure he didn't fall back into old patterns. "I'm proud of you," Lena said one night after he'd gotten off a particularly difficult call. "For what?" "For not shutting me out. For telling me what's going on instead of pretending everything's fine. I'm learning." "I know. Keep learning." The merger went through in May. Vail Industries absorbed the other company, and suddenly Adrian's net worth had doubled, and the business magazines were calling him a genius, and his phone wouldn't stop ringing. But the only call he cared about was from Lena, asking if he'd remembered to pick up Cameron from school. He had. He'd also picked up flowers for her and stopped by the bakery to get Cameron's favorite cookies. "Who are you, and what did you do with my workaholic fiancé?" Lena asked when he got home. "He learned his priorities." "Good. Keep him." June arrived with perfect weather and minor chaos. The wedding was at a small venue overlooking the Sound, with chairs set up on the lawn and flowers everywhere. Lena's parents were there, both crying before the ceremony even started. Vanessa came with her new boyfriend, which Adrian was fine with because he had Lena and nothing else really mattered. Cameron took his ring-bearer duties very seriously, walking down the aisle with the kind of concentration usually reserved for defusing bombs. Lena came down in her wheelchair wearing a simple white dress that made Adrian forget how to breathe. The ceremony was short. They'd written their own vows, which Adrian had agonized over for weeks. "Lena," he said, his voice not quite steady. "4 months ago, I watched you sit alone in a restaurant while someone told you that you weren't enough. And I remember thinking that guy was the biggest idiot I'd ever seen, because you've always been enough. You've always been more than enough. You're brilliant and stubborn and kind, and you make terrible jokes, and you have a cat that hates me, and I love all of it. I love you. And I promise to spend the rest of my life reminding you that you're exactly what I need." Lena's eyes were wet. "Adrian," she said, "you came over that night because you couldn't walk away. And I said yes to dinner because I was tired of being alone. And somehow we ended up here, and I just—" She stopped, took a breath. "I spent 3 years thinking I was broken, that the best parts of my life were behind me. And then you showed up and you saw me, really saw me, and you made me believe that maybe I wasn't broken after all. Maybe I was just waiting for someone who could see past what I'd lost to what I still had. So I promised to see you the same way, to remind you that you don't have to be perfect, that you're allowed to need help, that you're enough exactly as you are." There wasn't a dry eye in the place. They exchanged rings. They kissed. Cameron cheered. Hemingway, who Lena had insisted on having at the wedding despite Adrian's protests, promptly knocked over the unity candle. "That's on brand," Adrian said. "Completely on brand," Lena agreed. The reception was perfect chaos. Dancing and food and speeches that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Cameron gave a toast about how Lena made the best pancakes, and his dad smiled more now, and could they please get a dog next. "We'll see," Adrian said. "That's not a no," Cameron crowed. Later, when the party was winding down and the sun was setting over the Sound, Adrian found Lena by the water. She'd wheeled away from the crowd, just sitting there watching the light fade. "Hey," he said, coming up beside her. "You okay?" "Better than okay." She looked up at him. "I was just thinking about that night, at the restaurant. How different my life would be if you just stayed at your table. I couldn't. I know. That's what makes you you." Adrian sat down on a bench next to her wheelchair. "Do you ever wonder what he's doing, that guy who walked out?" "No, I hope he's happy. I hope he found whatever he was looking for, but I don't think about him." "Good." "Why good?" "Because he doesn't deserve your thoughts. He looked at you and saw what was missing." "I looked at you and saw everything that was there." Lena reached over and took his hand. "We're married." "We are." "That's wild. Completely wild. Any regrets?" Adrian looked at her, his wife now, not just his fiancée, and thought about the journey from that restaurant to here. All the fear and hope and stumbling forward. All the learning to be vulnerable and asking for help and letting someone in. "Not a single one," he said. They sat there as the sun set and the party continued behind them, and their future stretched out ahead like an open road. And Adrian thought about how sometimes the best decisions are the ones you make without thinking, the ones where you just follow your gut and hope for the best. He'd followed his gut that night in the restaurant, walked over to a stranger who needed help and offered what he could. And that single decision had led to this. To Lena. To a life that felt full in ways he'd stopped believing was possible. To happiness that didn't require perfection, just presence. Cameron ran up, still wearing his little suit. "Dad, Lena, they're cutting the cake." "We're coming, buddy," Lena said. They headed back to the party, Adrian walking, Lena wheeling, Cameron running ahead. And as they rejoined their friends and family, Adrian realized something. That guy who'd walked out on Lena had been right about one thing. She wasn't enough. She was everything, and she was his. The party lasted into the night, full of laughter and dancing, and the kind of joy that comes from people genuinely happy to be together. When it finally ended and they drove home, the three of them, plus Hemingway, who'd been collected from his cage by a very patient wedding coordinator, the house was quiet. Cameron fell asleep in the car. Adrian carried him up to bed, still in his suit, and pulled a blanket over him. Lena wheeled into the room behind him. "He did good today," she said quietly. "He did great. He loves you, you know." "I know. I love him too. And me." Adrian turned to face her. "Especially you." They went to their own room and got ready for bed, and when they finally settled in, Hemingway claiming his usual spot at their feet, Adrian pulled Lena close. "So this is it," he said. "Marriage. This is it. How do you feel?" "Like the luckiest person alive." "Same." They fell asleep like that, tangled together in a house that had gone from too big to exactly right, in a life that had gone from carefully controlled to beautifully chaotic. And in the morning, when Cameron woke them up way too early, wanting to know if now that they were married, did that mean Lena was officially his stepmom, and could they please get that dog now? Adrian couldn't even be annoyed, because this was his life now. The beautiful, messy, imperfect life he'd built with a woman who'd taught him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and asking for help wasn't failure. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do was just show up. "Maybe a small dog," Lena said, laughing at Cameron's excitement. "A small dog is still a dog." Cameron was already running downstairs, presumably to start researching breeds. Adrian looked at his wife, and shook his head. "You know he's going to want the biggest dog possible now, right?" "Probably, but we'll love it anyway." "We'll love it anyway," Adrian agreed. And that, in the end, was what it came down to. Love. Messy, imperfect, show-up-everyday love. The kind that didn't require grand gestures or perfect moments, just two people choosing each other over and over again, through all the chaos and joy and ordinary moments that made up a life. Adrian had spent years building an empire, chasing success, trying to prove he was enough. And he'd found everything he was looking for in a quiet moment at a restaurant, with a woman in a wheelchair who'd been told she wasn't enough, and a son who'd asked if they should do something. "Yeah, Cameron, we should." Best decision he'd ever made.